Hey friends, back with part 2 of my adventure using product analytics to sort out a problem with my website. Since we last talked, about a week has elapsed and I've spent some time looking at the statistics of what I found. In case you're new here, to catch you up, I have a newsletter called Tiny Improvements where I send emails to folks who are interested in building products just about weekly, sharing some of my experience as a builder. I was experiencing a significant drop in subscribers to my newsletter and I wasn't sure why. And so I went in and I plumbed through a whole bunch of stuff to be able to put in some analytics around detecting what was going wrong. And so I used PostHog to do that. PostHog is a product analytics tool. It has lots of nice hooks for tracking when things happen. You can keep track of user sessions, user data. You can capture specific events. Here's what I found in the last week. This is my ConvertKit dashboard, and this is where you can see something really interesting. Up to a few weeks ago, I was getting more or less no subscribers every day, and that's pretty abnormal for me. Really not trying to brag, but I usually get 1, 2, 3 subscribers every day, and then on days when I send out a newsletter, it's pretty normal at the scale I'm at to get a few unsubscribes as well. Well, for a while, I was kind of only getting unsubscribes on a really rare subscription. From last time, we set up this subscription form to send new subscribers to ConvertKit's API, which was a pretty reasonable turnaround from what it was before, which was just kind of an HTML embed that ConvertKit provided. What changed since last time is I added a bunch of hooks to be able to, 1, listen to what was happening using PostHog, and track submissions, and then hopefully catch errors. And I'm happy to say that I found a few errors, and they were sort of syntactical errors along the way. The couple that I've chased down had a bunch to do with the way I was submitting API calls in some cases. I also saw a few people submit where things seem to be crashing, maybe silently at this page. I'm not getting great feedback from the API from ConvertKit, which is unfortunate. I also saw a few that made it through part of this and then kind of failed silently. So I was getting events for newsletter subscribed in PostHog. I can go and see those. And thankfully, because I was chasing down the email and the first name, I was able to go get those people's information and manually add that to ConvertKit because I've been checking every few days. But what I wasn't getting is an error back. Presumably it was coming back as a 200 or a success. And it looked like everything worked to the end user and it never went into the mailing list. That's bad news. I've done a bunch of things to try and figure out what I can do, including sending messages to ConvertKit to try and get access to their newer API. They have a V4 API coming. However, what I've landed on ultimately is that ConvertKit probably isn't looking for someone like me as their end user. At the moment, it seems like they're after creator types who are not developers. And I'm kind of both, I guess, but I'm more developer flavored than creator type. There's a lot of things I do that ConvertKit isn't really designed to do. And so I've made the decision to step aside from using ConvertKit and switch over to using a different service. And hopefully, I think that's where things will get interesting. I'm happy to say that this video is also sponsored by the team at PostHog. If you know me, you know that transparency is important. So I want to make sure you know this video is sponsored, but I also want to make sure you know that I was planning on doing this video before PostHog got in touch with me and that they don't have any editorial control over what I say here. What you're hearing from me is truly what I believe in using the tool, and the reason I use it is because it's something that I find valuable. I use it on my personal site, I use it at Craftwork for my full-time job, and it's something I believe in. I wouldn't put something in front of you that I don't personally believe in, and PostHog is one of those things that I use all the time. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. Okay, stop me if you saw this one coming. I'm going to switch to a service called Resend, which is a developer-first email platform. About a year ago, they added functionality for sending broadcasts, which is effectively the kind of tool that I'm looking for. Something like a newsletter is perfect for the broadcasts feature. So I've spent some time refactoring and building this in, and along the way, I did a few things that hopefully will make it easier to maintain my site. I added tRPC to my Next.js site. If you're not familiar with it, tRPC lets you have type-safe APIs from end to end, and it's really built around Next.js, although it can work with a ton of different frameworks. So I did a bunch of work to both remove ConvertKit, add tRPC, and then add subscribers using Resend. And here's what that looks like. I'll spare you the full setup details for tRPC because they have great documentation and tutorials on their site. And to be honest, there's probably other creators who've done Next.js tutorials from end to end that are really good, and you should go check some of those out. In the end, what I've created now is a type-safe way to call my APIs that gives me really good feedback and is sort of developer experience first. It's really nice to use. The sum total of all the APIs that I created for my own use on my site amounts to mailing list related stuff. So I stuck them in this thing called Mailing List Router. If I jump in here, you can see Mailing List Router really has 2 functions in it. These 2 functions are stats and subscribe. Stats I use to pull my subscriber count because I use that on various pages on the site for sort of social proof that you might also want to subscribe to the newsletter. And then subscribe obviously is the other side of that. That's where I take an email and a first name and optionally a last name and send them off to be a subscriber on my list. If we jump into the subscription form, you can see now that the subscription form is using tRPC and a thing called a mutation, meaning something that makes a change to fire off that subscriber change. So This is the same file we were looking at last time, and this used to be a bunch of fetch logic to go to /API/subscriber or something like that. Now it's using tRPC, which lets me get really nice completion when I'm working, and I am using the subscription mutation to fire off the subscribe call. So when the form is submitted, this is used to add subscribers. Let's look at that. On handle submission, I'm saying, wait, add subscriber mutation.mutate async, and that's it. That's great. The information to identify someone on PostHog is here, and I have additional steps on success and on error when I create the mutation to create a pattern around that. So when it succeeds, I call refresh stats, which refreshes the statistics number listed on the site, and I capture an event saying newsletter subscribed. And on error, if something goes wrong, I do the other thing, newsletter subscribe error, where I send off the email and their first name as well as the error. The other thing you're seeing in here, source, is meant to be an internal field for where they subscribe. In other words, what page were they on when they subscribed and which form was it? Was it the little call to action at the top of the newsletter page? Was it on a specific newsletter? That sort of thing. That's what this looks like now, and I've got wonderful separation of concerns. This subscription form is the only place where I do subscription stuff within the app. I have a clear path for when things go well and when things don't go well. And along the way, now I'm using PostHog to capture the data about what's going wrong and what isn't within the app. So in the future, I can look back at this and see, am I getting errors for people subscribing? Am I having success from people subscribing? Am I missing people along the way? What's going on here? And I can act accordingly. So this is really, really nice. One other thing I wanted to show really quickly, I created a custom hook called useNewsletterStats, which may be a little overkill, but it allows me to encapsulate all the behavior around the stats that I show on my site. And right now, really all I'm working with is showing a subscriber count. So I go and pull that from a query using tRPC. So I set up tRPC stats use query. This undefined here means that there's no parameters that this query needs to actually get information. And the stale time here says that tRPC will know to refetch this number after 30 seconds. tRPC has a bunch of settings based on React query that are really sensible for refetching data. But for something like this, where it's not mission critical, 30 seconds is like pretty reasonable for fetching a new subscriber amount. And so all I'm doing here is getting the return value from that query as a subscriber count. It's either a number or undefined. Then I return this as part of my hook. So I have a subscriber count here, and then I have refresh stats, which is the thing I use to say, oh, hey, can you go proactively get new stats for this thing? It's a nice pattern. It allows me to use this to pull in my stats anywhere I want to. And I'm going to expand on this eventually to include things that potential sponsors may want to use, like click-through rates and audience size and opens, things like that. Okay, real quick, I also want to show what I'm seeing within PostHog, which has been really helpful to me. I don't really want to show people's contact information, so I've removed what's actually useful for me, which is email addresses and like session IDs. However, what you can see here is that I have a bunch of tests for me running this thing initially. Back in March, I was poking around with this, and you can kind of see that things are starting to come back into reality now. I'm expecting to see these newsletter subscribed events fire off way more often. And actually, I'm also expecting now to see a bunch of other different events come in here too, as I've added them. So right now we only see newsletter subscribed, but if I jump back into the code and I go to my subscription form, you'll see we now have newsletter subscribe error, which should show up if anyone sees an error. And in fact, I might add other events too. It might be useful for me to do something along the lines of someone tried a demo or somebody clicked on the button to get to my contact information or something like that, to understand a little more about their personal journey through the software for me. Particularly if I want to do a store or courses or get people to subscribe to my YouTube channel or whatever it is from my website, I can get much richer information about that person's activity along the way. So I can kind of create a journey for them. So that's where I'm at now. Things seem to be working. And in fact, my subscribers have picked up quite a bit. After going through error logs, I found something else that's really interesting, and it's shown on this page. On the left is my local developer environment. On the right is the production site. This weekend, while I was going through and building some of the code to update to Resend, I found 200 subscribers that had been missing. So they were buried in logs, and it took a little bit of regex magic to actually go and find them. But I think this answers some of the question too, is that quite a few people had subscribed and I just never knew about it, and they never made it fully to the list. So I kind of expect a couple things to happen. Being honest with myself, there's 200 new people going on this mailing list who were expecting emails from me a while ago, and they're just about to get the first one. So I think this email I'm about to send will have an unusual amount of unsubscribes. I'll probably see quite a few of these 200 people unsubscribe, and I'm okay with that. I think that's a reasonable trade-off for now. There will also be a little bit of churn, probably related to using a new service for the first time. My mailing template in Resend will look a little bit different than it did in ConvertKit, which may feel unfamiliar to some people. They might think it's weird, and that's okay too. What I'm happy to see is that I have momentum going in the right direction, and I'm really interested in using Resend's features because they're more developer focused. So what's next for me? Well, I made reference to this during my first video on the series here, but I think I'm going to do some experiments using PostHog's A/B testing to check which calls to action resonate the most with my readers. In other words, I want to test if specific copy will get someone to subscribe with a higher likelihood than others. I think it'll be interesting to find out what happens there. And one of the things I really like is that data doesn't lie. So I'll do whatever the numbers say, I'll trust that, and I'm willing to try things out. If you're still watching, I would love to know what you think are good call to actions for me to use here. So feel free to drop a comment below with things that you would resonate with as someone who's watching this video. If you've read any of my articles, any of my newsletters, tell me the things that make you interested in the kind of stuff I have to write. That's something that I think every creative person sort of struggles with. And for me, it's really interesting to hear what you think. All right, so here's what we've done so far. We found a problem, we fixed a problem, and then we found more problems with that problem and put in a much more sensitive technical solution to hopefully be able to give me better feedback on what's going on. Since the first video, I've seen subscribers starting to come back again in a more normal fashion. So I'm seeing a few people a day sign up for subscriptions, which is exactly what I expect to see. And I also found 200 or so subscribers that had tried to subscribe and never made it to the list. I've switched platforms to Resend. I'm going to send a broadcast with Resend this week to my newsletter list and learn a bunch from that, no doubt. And I'm also going to start building an A/B testing for calls to action to get new people to subscribe to my newsletter. So that's a whole lot, and it's really fun to do. All total, this amounts to a few hours of development work on my end. I've honestly been getting this work in around the margins of my full-time job, which is really nice for me. It's really great when it doesn't take long to be able to get this amount of functionality. And if you think about what it would take for me to build an email broadcast tool for myself or PostHog's event capture for myself, that would be just an army of people and a crazy amount of time to get done. So I'm really lucky to be able to use tools like this. And one of the reasons to consider that, I think in both cases, is that the free tier for both of these tools is really generous. You can hop in and use it straight away and decide if it's a good fit for you without breaking the bank. I hope you really enjoyed this and learned something. If you have any ideas for other things you want to see me do, I'm all ears. Please feel free to jump in the comments and let me know. Until next time, my name is Mike Bifulco. This is Tiny Improvements. I'll catch you then. See ya.